If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Democrat or a Republican. No one should be above the law in this country, and the law required that he be held to account, so that is what I did. To have done otherwise on the facts of these cases would have been to shirk my duties as a prosecutor and as a public servant, of which I had no intention of doing. I remain grateful for the counsel, judgment, and advice of my team.
There is a specific kind of testimony that changes the historical record. It does not rely on adjectives. It does not rely on speculation. It relies on the rigid application of the rule of law by those sworn to uphold it. Special Counsel Jack Smith appeared before a committee to put his career and his findings on the record. He did not speak as a politician. He spoke as a prosecutor.
And I prosecuted war crimes overseas. I am not a politician, and I have no partisan loyalties. My career has been dedicated to serving our country by upholding the rule of law. Throughout my public service, my approach has always been the same. Follow the facts and the law without fear or favor.
He defined the difference between a political narrative and criminal evidence, and he defined exactly what the American legal system requires when a former president willfully breaks the law. That is a lie. The claim that the investigation into Donald Trump was motivated by politics is a lie. The claim that the charges were brought to affect the 2024 election is a lie. The claim that the Department of Justice acted out of hatred or bias is a lie. We know this is a lie because the special counsel has now testified under oath to the exact contrary. He has placed his 30-year career on the line to correct the record. He stated clearly that he appeared to correct false and misleading narratives about the work of the special counsel's office. The narrative that this prosecution was a political hit job is false. It is contradicted by the sworn testimony of the man who led the investigation. Donald Trump and his allies have repeatedly claimed that the Department of Justice targeted him for political reasons. They claim the timing and the charges are election interference. Jack Smith identified these claims as false narratives.
I made my decisions without regard to President Trump's political association, activities, beliefs, or candidacy in the 2024 election.
He stated explicitly that he made his decisions without regard to President Trump's political association. He stated that he made his decisions without regard to President Trump's activities. He stated that he made his decisions without regard to President Trump's beliefs. Most importantly, he stated that he made his decisions without regard to President Trump's candidacy in the 2024 election. The special counsel defined the falsehood. The investigation was not about the election calendar. It was about the criminal code. We must look at the forensic evidence presented by the special counsel. The evidence does not prove a political vendetta. The evidence proves crimes. Jack Smith testified that his investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal activity. This is not a guess. This is not a theory. This is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The evidence established that Donald Trump willfully broke the law. These were the very laws he took an oath to uphold. The evidence traces specific actions taken by the former president. The special counsel's team found that rather than accept his defeat in the 2020 election, President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme. The purpose of this scheme was to overturn the results. The purpose was to prevent the lawful transfer of power. This is the forensic finding of the investigation. The evidence further shows that after leaving office in January of 2021, President Trump illegally kept classified documents. He kept these documents at his Mar-a-Lago social club. He repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents. The evidence places highly sensitive national security information in specific locations.
After leaving office in January of 21, President Trump illegally kept classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago social club and repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents. Highly sensitive national security information was held in a ballroom and a bathroom.
It was held in a ballroom. It was held in a bathroom. The forensic evidence proves possession. It proves obstruction. It proves a willful violation of the law. We must analyze the power dynamics at play here. This was an exercise of power by a former president to place himself above the law. Donald Trump used his power to engage in a scheme to stop the transfer of power. He used his control over his private club to hide national secrets in unsecured areas like a ballroom and a bathroom. When the investigation began, he used his public platform to attack the investigators. Jack Smith testified that President Trump has sought to seek revenge against career prosecutors.
President Trump has sought to seek revenge against career prosecutors, FBI agents, and support staff simply for having worked on these cases. To vilify and seek retribution against these people is wrong.
He has sought to seek revenge against FBI agents. He has sought to seek revenge against support staff. This is a power play designed to intimidate. The former president vilifies these public servants simply for having worked on these cases. He seeks retribution against them. This is an attempt to control the legal process through fear. It is an attempt to erode the rule of law by targeting the people who enforce it. The special counsel noted that to vilify these people is wrong. The power of the former president was deployed to obstruct justice and to punish those who investigated that obstruction. The strongest defense argument is that this prosecution is unprecedented and therefore unfair. The defense argues that no former president has been charged in this way, implying a double standard. Jack Smith dismantled this defense with a single principle. He stated that if he were asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, he would do so. It would not matter if that president was a Democrat or a Republican. The defense of selective prosecution fails against the facts. Smith testified that he has prosecuted in both Republican and Democratic administrations. He has no partisan loyalties. The defense relies on the idea that a president is special. The law says otherwise. Smith stated that no one should be above the law in this country. To have done otherwise on the facts of these cases would have been to shirk his duties as a prosecutor. It would have been to shirk his duties as a public servant. The defense argument collapses because it asks for an exception to the law. The special counsel refused to grant that exception. We need to understand the legal education provided by this testimony. The rule of law is not automatic. Jack Smith warned that the rule of law is not self-executing. It does not happen by magic. It depends on our collective commitment to apply it. It requires dedicated service. The legal system functions only when prosecutors follow the facts and the law without fear or favor. The standard for these charges was high. It was not based on suspicion. It was based on the conclusion of grand juries in 2 separate districts. These grand juries returned indictments based on the actions alleged. The legal threshold was proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the highest standard in our legal system. The investigation followed Justice Department policies. It observed legal requirements. This was not a rogue operation. It was the strict application of the criminal justice process. The law required that he be held to account. That is the legal reality. When the evidence establishes a willful break of the law, the system demands a charge. We must make a professional judgment on responsibility. The special counsel stands by his decisions. He stands by the decision to bring charges against President Trump. This indicates a professional certainty about the evidence. The judgment is that the former president is responsible for his actions. He is responsible for the criminal scheme to overturn the election. He is responsible for the illegal retention of documents. He is responsible for the obstruction of justice. There is also a judgment on the fitness of the attacks launched by the defendant. The special counsel described the dedicated public servants working on this case as the best of us. He stated that it has been a privilege to serve with them. In contrast, the defendant seeks retribution against them. The professional judgment here is clear. The prosecutors are upholding their oath. The defendant is attacking the system that holds him accountable. We must look at the authority of the man bringing these charges. Jack Smith is not a politician. He is a career prosecutor with nearly 3 decades of experience. He has served in domestic settings and international settings. His experience is vast. He has handled domestic assault cases. He has handled gang violence cases. He has handled public corruption cases. He has handled election crimes across the United States. He has prosecuted war crimes overseas. This is an expert authority stack that cannot be dismissed. He has seen how the rule of law can erode. He understands the fragility of the system. He has dedicated his career to upholding the rule of law. He loves his country. He believes deeply in the core principles upon which it was founded. When this authority tells you that the evidence established a crime, it is backed by 30 years of professional rigor. There is a question of institutional accountability. The Department of Justice has a responsibility to do the right thing. They must do it the right way. They must do it for the right reasons. Jack Smith testified that specific case outcomes are beyond their control. Their job is to put the case forward. The failure to act would have been a failure of the institution. Smith stated that he had no intention of shirking his duties. The institution of the grand jury performed its function. 2 separate districts reviewed the evidence and returned indictments. The system worked as designed. The failure of accountability would have been to ignore the facts. The failure would have been to let the sensitive information sit in a ballroom and a bathroom without consequence. The institution acted because the facts required it. The collective commitment to apply the law was tested, and the institution responded. We end with the procedural consequences. There is no hope here. There is no hype here. There is only the cost of the rule of law. Service to the rule of law is difficult. It comes with costs. Jack Smith testified that our willingness to pay those costs is what tests our commitment. It defines our commitment to this country. The consequence of this investigation is that a former president faces charges because the law required it. The consequence is that the evidence of a criminal scheme and obstruction of justice is now part of the permanent record. The special counsel has done his job. He followed the facts. He followed the law. He ignored the politics. Now, the procedural consequence is that the case stands on the evidence. The proof was developed beyond a reasonable doubt. The rest is up to the courts. The rule of law depends on it.